In the quiet discipline of old Japan, where mornings began before the sun and effort was as natural as breathing, there lived a boy who was never the weakest, never the worst, and yet never the one remembered. A boy who stood just one step behind greatness his entire life, close enough to feel its presence, close enough to understand its shape, but never close enough to hold it. And at first, this seemed like a small thing, almost invisible, because losing by a little does not feel like losing at all. It feels like almost winning, like being on the edge of something important, like being next. And so the boy grew up believing that his time would come, that one day the gap would close, that one day he would finally stand in the place he had always been so close to. And because of that belief, he carried himself with quiet hope, training harder than some, observing more than most, always watching carefully, always learning, always adjusting. But every time the moment came, every time he stood across from someone and the outcome mattered, something subtle would happen, something almost invisible, and he would fall just short, not by much, never by much, just enough to remain second, just enough to keep the story the same. And at first, he accepted it, because being second still meant he was good, still meant he was respected, still meant he belonged among those who were trying. But over time, that small distance began to grow heavier, because almost is a dangerous place to live. It keeps you close enough to dream, but far enough to doubt. And slowly, without realizing it, the boy began to change, not in his skill, not in his effort, but in how he saw himself, because after enough repeated outcomes, the mind begins to build a story, and his story became simple and quiet and painful. He is the one who comes close. He is the one who tries. He is the one who is never enough. And once that story took root, it began to shape everything, because he no longer stepped forward with belief. He stepped forward with expectation. And expectation has weight. It slows the hands, it clouds the mind, it makes hesitation feel like truth. And so, even when his body was ready, his mind was already accepting defeat, already preparing for second place before the first move had even been made. And that is a battle no training can win, because it is not fought with the body. It is fought with identity. And identity is built slowly, quietly, over time, until it feels like reality itself. And so the boy continued, day after day, year after year, improving. Yes, but always stopping just short of where he wanted to be, watching others celebrate, hearing praise that was never meant for him, standing close enough to feel it but never close enough to receive it. And what made it harder was not that others were better, but that he could see it. He understood what they were doing right. He could point out their strengths, their habits, their discipline. He knew what it took. He knew the path. He could explain it better than many who walked it. But knowing is not the same as becoming, and understanding is not the same as believing. And so he lived in this strange space where his mind was clear but his identity was broken. And over time, the joy he once felt began to fade, replaced by something quieter, something heavier, a mixture of frustration and comparison, because he could not stop measuring himself against those who stood ahead of him, and every comparison became another confirmation of the story he had built, another reminder that he was not the one who wins, just the one who almost does. And this is where many people break, not because they are incapable, but because they begin to believe a version of themselves that is smaller than who they truly are. And the boy stood on that edge for a long time, longer than he should have, carrying a weight that no one else could see, until one day something shifted, not in the training yard, not in competition, but in silence, when he found himself alone, away from the noise, away from the eyes, away from the constant comparison. And for the first time in years, he asked himself a different question, not why am I not the best, not why do I keep losing, but who am I doing this for? And that question cut deeper than any loss, because it revealed something he had been avoiding, that his entire effort had been tied to others, to their praise, their position, their recognition. And as long as that remained true, he would always be chasing something outside of himself, always measuring, always comparing, always falling short, because there will always be someone ahead, always someone stronger, faster, better. And so in that moment, tired of chasing a position that never felt like his, he made a quiet decision, not a dramatic one, not a loud one, but a simple shift. He would continue, but differently. He would train without looking at others, without checking where he stood, without asking who was first or second. He would move for the sake of movement, improve for the sake of improvement. And at first, nothing seemed to change. His rank remained the same. His results looked similar. But inside, something had begun to rebuild. Because when you remove comparison, you remove fear. And when fear fades, clarity returns. And with clarity comes consistency, and consistency over time creates something far more powerful than talent. It creates identity, a new one, not built on outcomes, but on actions. And slowly, the boy who was always second stopped thinking of himself as second at all, because he was no longer measuring, no longer waiting for validation, no longer chasing a place. He was simply becoming. And that shift changed everything, not instantly, not dramatically, but deeply. Because now every step forward belonged to him. Every improvement was real, every effort was honest. And in time, something surprising happened. He grew, not just in skill, but in presence, in calm, in control. And one day, when he stood again across from another opponent, something felt different, not because he was stronger, but because he was free. Free from the weight of expectation, free from the need to prove, free from the story that had once defined him. And for the first time, the outcome did not matter, because he was no longer fighting to become someone else. He was simply expressing who he had become. And in that moment, whether he won or lost became irrelevant, because he had already stepped beyond the place where he had been stuck for so long. And in the end, the boy who was always second did not become first in the way he once imagined, but he became something far greater. A man who was no longer controlled by comparison, no longer limited by old beliefs. A man who had finally stepped out of the shadow of others and into his own path. And in that quiet transformation, without applause, without recognition, without announcement, he found something he had been chasing his entire life. Not victory over others, but peace within himself. And that is a victory that no one can take away.